Welcome to the Confident Marketing Leader podcast, where we empower you to make your mark as a strategic and impactful marketing leader. Each episode, join us as we bring in top industry experts to help you earn and keep your seat at the leadership table. Well, hello, Michelle. I am so excited for this conversation because I've been reaching out to the top 10 rising stars of the marketing world, according to LinkedIn. And there's so much that we can all learn from each other. And it's just been fascinating to hear about everybody's background and get advice for how B2B marketers can show up with more confidence and more credibility, and especially with all the uncertainty that's happening today, how to stay grounded in all of this. So I'm extremely excited for our conversation today. So welcome.
Yes, thanks for having me. Definitely glad to be here.
Yes. Okay. So let's get a little bit of your background and experience in marketing, and how did you get started in marketing?
So I started marketing technically 2004 while I was in college. At that time, I started doing a lot of entertainment marketing around music, even movies and film, and young college student just trying to get in where you fit in, have fun. And I noticed around 2006 is when WordPress and MySpace started bubbling. And I was like, okay. So I was putting my own blog together and I was writing press releases and bios and submitting articles for different magazines. So I was doing content marketing and thought leadership before I really knew what I was doing. And then fast forward, when social media or Facebook particularly kind of grew, I'm like, they're going to start advertising soon. And at that time, I realized baby boomers were struggling because they're like, I don't know what to post. What is this thing? I don't want to post my meals on. And I was like, well, you don't know what to post because you're not creating content. And it's like, what? So I came in helping businesses at that time. They've been in business at least about 10 years. So they were stable, but they were struggling with this social media piece. And I would come in and help them with their content and social media marketing. Did that for several years and then just evolved into personal branding. I've self-published a few books, had a couple of podcasts, been really big on thought leadership. And then the past couple of years, I've been focusing on inclusive marketing with medium to large size organizations.
Yeah, that's awesome. And you got started in the fun industry then with entertainment, not boring tech.
I mean, as a college student, absolutely. I think as an adult now, I'm like, you couldn't pay me to go outside at night.
Yes. Okay. So tell me, how does it feel to be named a LinkedIn Rising Star of the marketing world?
It feels great. I think LinkedIn is definitely one of my favorite social media platforms. I say it's not the sexy platform, but it's my favorite platform. And I think it's always been that hybrid of I want it to be my dream job / dream client. So to be featured in their publication twice within a year has been just phenomenal. I've been able to connect with a lot of great people, such as yourself. It's just been phenomenal. As I guess, a content leader, content marketer, I think it's one of those things you don't realize the importance of it until you experience it and you start connecting with other people.
Yeah, well, congratulations.
Thank you.
I want to dig a little bit more into your focus now, which is inclusive marketing. And what are some of the problems or challenges that you're finding that companies are facing as it relates to inclusive marketing?
Yeah, so I started about 4 years ago. I just saw a bunch of bad, mainly advertising, and I have to say TV ads as well as digital ads that show Black people and other minorities in a negative light. And I was just like, who's approving these messages? How is this getting passed? And I think there's a thin line with some of these brands of because you can go viral for the wrong thing and still make money.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
I'm very mindful of that. I just wanted to get inside the minds of some of these agencies and brands to figure out, like, hey, what's going on? And I think the biggest thing is one, America's a melting pot. We always have been. And the way that the population is growing, we have to be mindful of just the overall minority or the BIPOC community. I like to say inclusive marketing because it's not just about race and culture, but you have LGBTQ, you have people with disabilities, you have neurodiversity on the rise. So, what are those things that you're doing to make sure that they're included, especially as a consumer, that they can buy your product or service?
Okay. That's such a great focus today. I think, especially in the world of advertising where you can go back and look over the last 50 years and how it's evolved. And I think there's a lot of room for growth there. So, what kind of clients do you typically work with?
Yeah, so unbeknownst to me, I started working with a lot of nonprofit organizations, and I just
Okay.
think, the budgets are a little bit tighter, and then messaging has to be more clear. So working with nonprofits, but I like working with middle-sized organizations. So they have about, I say, 100 to 200 plus employees, because they're in that growing stage where they're starting to be more mindful of employee resource groups. That
Mm.
company culture is not as tight because they're expanding, but they want to keep it intact as they grow. And then, of course, the more people you're hiring, probably the more money, the more revenue that's coming in. And now you're are really considering, okay, not only do you need to hire a consultant, but what are some of these new ideas and avenues that a consultant's going to share that we can also support our money in these various efforts as well?
So, do you work with CEOs or the head of marketing? Like, what's the primary?
Yes. So I prefer working with brand directors, marketing directors, not necessarily depends on the size of the company as well, not necessarily the CMO, but the person right underneath them. And if they have a full size marketing team, and I'll say full size can be anywhere from 5 to 10, maybe 15 people. So I can come in, do trainings with them. And I've also worked as a consultant where I'm acting as a liaison between the brand and their marketing agency. So, especially when you have these larger organizations, they already have a dedicated marketing agency that they're working with. So they just need to have me come in for a short-term project, a couple of weeks, maybe just review something, review their website before they launch it, just a couple of things. Once again, another training or some tweaks here and there, and they're pretty much good to go. When it comes to my work, it's more of you're probably already doing the right thing, but I come in to help you be more mindful of some of your marketing efforts, your strategies when it comes to advertising, messaging, employee culture engagement, things of that nature.
I'm curious what you're seeing in terms of just that, how marketers are showing up today and building their confidence, especially when working with, maybe what I always refer to as non-marketers, the rest of the people in the organization that don't really understand marketing and all the nuances that go into sort of the behind the scenes to get something magical created and published. Are you seeing that marketers are struggling with showing up with confidence?
I think so. I just feel like our job has become a lot tougher over the past 5 years. And, social media is the gift and the curse because it's this thing where we're like, oh, it's a free platform, and that affects so many things. It affects wages, it, affects salaries, and it even affects strategy because yes, it's a free platform, but then depending on what you're doing and the initiative behind it, you also need to pay money for these digital ads, right? On top of that, as a marketer, I think we have an interesting task because it's like we have to have this balance of empathy while we're trying to get your money. Right?
Yes, right.
So it's like, how can I pull on these heartstrings and convince you to buy this product or service? Right? Convince you to make this investment. So I do think we're definitely in a unique position. And then at the same time, making sure that we are catering to our core audience at the same time, trying to bring in new people to, once again, invest in our products and services and all of these things. So Our hands are definitely full as a marketer.
Yes, absolutely. How do you handle, or advise companies to handle kind of all the uncertainty as well? Politics and economy and viral campaigns and trends, there's just so much going on. How are you navigating that or advising your clients to navigate that?
My biggest thing is sometimes you have to go back to the basics, right? So that really means, okay, well, what are your core values? Your company core values, as well as your individual core values, especially if you're the CEO of a small company, those tend to overlap, right? Your personal and business core
Mm.
values. And then at the same time, listen, what are people saying? Sometimes people just need to share whatever's on their mind. And I do believe transparency comes from the top down. I do know as a leader, it is tough to take in all of this feedback and to make a decision. But once there's final decisions, how do you communicate that to the top down in order for your employees to follow your lead, the company lead? So those are my two things: identifying your core values, listening, and then transparency with your company.
Yeah, and I love you bring up personal core values. I mean, do you find that people know what those are, like off the top of their head, or do they have to work to figure out what those are?
I think you have to work to figure what your core values are, and that's something I had to do probably about 5 to 7 years ago, and I got that from one of my virtual mentors, right, when I started hearing him talk about it, because 'cause I'm like, "I know I'm a good person. I believe I'm a good person, but what makes me a good person?" Right?
Mm,
What do I believe in? What are can I really identify those things that my parents and environment friends have taught me in the past 30 something years. And I really had to sit down with that and narrow that down to about 3 to 5 things. You know, me as an individual, my business, my dating life, all of that stuff.
I love that. Yeah, I mean, I think it's a really important exercise. And I was just having a conversation with somebody on LinkedIn about brands, the responsibility of a brand. And if you're the marketer, you're really behind the brand, right? And building relationships with people. And that's very similar of being a person and just the human side of building relationships with people. And for me, when I read that, I was like, that is 100% true. And you have to choose a company, maybe an organization that also values those same things so that you don't feel like you're in conflict with yourself.
Absolutely. And I definitely think that can be a marketing strategy. I mean, those are those small, undervalued nuances that can come to the top when you need to come up with the brand campaign, right?
Hmm.
How do you want to tap in? I think once you have your brand values and a person has their personal or core values, what is created is brand loyalty, right?
Right.
Like there people like to go to Chick-fil-A because it's a Christian foundation establishment and they're closed on Sundays and they probably make the most money on Saturday and Monday,
Yeah.
right? I mean, it's one of the top leading fast food chains and they're closed on Sunday. Like that's amazing.
Right.
And I think people just resonate with that because we're pretty much a Christian or a Bible-based country. I don't know, we just kind of resonate with that, and it's slightly unspoken.
Yeah. No, I think that's a great example. And also it creates a little bit of scarcity too, right? Like I got to get it in. It's only open 6 days a week. And yeah, playing on that piece as well, which it's amazing. And I think in that example too, it's starting from the top, right?
Mm,
And they're creating the entire culture so that you come into that and
mhm.
then everybody knows it.
Yeah, that's a good point.
So as a marketing leader, how do you prioritize the many demands on your time and resources for what you focus on versus the value that you need to deliver to the organization?
Yeah, it definitely depends on the day. I think definitely sometimes you just have that big task that needs to be knocked out, and then everything else kind of falls into place. Constantly checking myself when it comes to delegate, delegate, delegate. And then even with the delegation, I think something that's not talked about a lot is making sure that you are informing that person of maybe a job description, systems and processes that go with that delegation, right? So it's not like, oh, go fetch me some water. It's like, I have a water bottle in front of me, but it's like, hey, can you go to the grocery store and get me a case of water from, da 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 da. And I think that's something I definitely constantly mindful and improving on a regular basis of providing details when it comes to
Mm,
that delegation.
yeah, that's a good point. Well, and I think especially for marketers in this day and age, there's so many different interpretations. I mean, you mentioned job descriptions, and my head went to the typical practice of let's go to Google and copy and paste a whole bunch of different job description, put it into one, and hopefully find that unicorn.
You're tuning in to the Confident Marketing Leader podcast, where we share advice to build credibility and impact as a B2B marketer. You can also catch our episodes on Spotify and Apple Podcasts and the video version of this podcast on YouTube.
I had a situation the other day and I asked someone, I was like, hey, can you moderate this Facebook group? And they're like, yeah, what is my task? Like, what do you want me to do? And it's like, I want you to moderate, right?
Moderate.
But I had to go back and like really think. I'm like, okay, I need to create, even if it's 3 to 5 bullet points, I need to be more clear on my instruction versus just, once again, hey, do this for me. And it's like, I'm glad to, but there's a disconnect there. So I'm constantly like, okay, I need to minimize this disconnect with my team.
Yeah, that's a great lesson. Delegation, I think, yeah. Anybody in a leadership position basically has to learn how to do that. Let's talk a little bit about personal branding and this topic always fascinates me because I spent 14 years working inside of different corporate companies, Fortune 500 mostly. And I was always like the face behind the brand. I was very comfortable being behind the brand. And then I went out and started my own thing and had to all of a sudden be more front and center. And I'd be curious your take on personal branding for marketers because we're so used to marketing somebody else's thing or a brand and not necessarily feeling comfortable, putting our own selves out there. How do you advise people, I guess, to get over that and to build some confidence there?
Look, it's tough. I had another marketing friend, get into me yesterday, and she was like, people want to see raw, uncut, unfinished video in this case on social media. It does not need to be polished. And I was like, okay, yeah, girl, like, right. But I think sometimes we are our worst enemy, right? Because we know what it takes to create, not just hosting it, but to create content, the process as far as, okay, when does it need to go out, the day, the time, if we're really into our data like that. So it's not just one of those things where it's like, oh, let's post and pray. And I
Right.
think we're just so mindful of strategy, buyer behavior, all of these things that sometimes it does paralyze us when it comes to our own self-promotion. So I think the best thing is do what you can with what you have, right? I started podcasting several years ago, and the thing was start with where you are. Just start. Don't worry about buying all of this equipment when we have $1,000 phones in our back pocket that can do just about anything, right? And
Yeah.
I think once you start with what you have and you warm up and become consistent and you're seeing ROI, not necessarily financial, but just an overall return of investment, then you can think, okay, well, do I want to increase my frequency? Okay, do I want to invest in a laptop or a camera or an editor? And I think it's just gradual steps you have to be mindful about. And once again, really considering ROI from an overall standpoint and not just in financial terms, especially within the 1st year.
Yeah. And I think what I see marketers that just kind of take what their company is doing and then they repost it on their own social media and they get no engagement because people don't really want to just see a regurgitated article or press release from a company. They want to know the person behind that. And I see on LinkedIn that that's starting to shift a little bit, but I just wonder how people, maybe it's like post one day out of the week that's something personal about you versus just resharing your company's content.
Yeah, I think people, especially if you're a writer or just a creator, people want the story behind the story, right? So
Mm-hmm.
it's like, what led you to write this article, or what led your marketing team to agree on this topic, this title, this interview? And I think if you share a little bit of yourself on how you came up with this idea and then you post an article or video, I think that's more intriguing, right? Because it's like, you're leading me to the well and now I want to drink because you got me so curious. I can't help but to take a sip of this cup of water, what you're selling me.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And that story is easier to tell, right? It's like you're just sort of putting the facts behind it a little bit and getting people a little more interested. Okay, so last question for you. In a constantly evolving marketing landscape, how are you staying ahead of trends and using new technologies like AI? And how do you think that's going to play out for the rest of the year?
Yeah, so I'm constantly on LinkedIn reading articles amongst my peers, reading Content Marketing Institute, reading social media marketing. I know they just had their conference, Social Media Marketing World. I'm thinking of the conference right now. Search Engine Journal, just, trying to stay abreast on various topics. ChatGPT is an amazing tool, still playing around with that. Of course, I'm big on YouTube. I know everyone loves TikTok. I love watching a good YouTube video for some reason. And just trying to learn, right? And trying to figure out how I can incorporate some things similar to you. I'm preparing for a live event in June. And, sometimes like, things, but it's like, okay, let me double check, right? Am I in align with the latest things? Am I saying this right? Like, am I articulating my message correctly? So those are some benefits when it comes to some of these AI tools. And then also just making things more efficient for you as well.
Yeah. Have you started looking at ChatGPT and through the lens of inclusive marketing?
Oh, absolutely. So earlier this year, I released my card game, my diversity
Oh,
card
yeah.
game. So when I had to create the website and, all of the content for that, I was definitely using ChatGPT for some of my web copy as well as my marketing plan.
And tell everybody what the diversity card game is.
So this is Be Inclusive, a DEI card game. And I have 2 decks, Company Culture and DEI. And each deck has 50 questions. And it's just a way to really have a good conversation amongst your team. One thing I believe is unique about this, I know we do trainings all the time, right? But this is not about lecture. This is about a shared perspective. I think anyone can do DEI, teach, speak on DEI, diversity, or even company culture, because it's based off of your experience. It's based off of your perspective. And the company culture questions are really centered between leadership and employee engagement, from recruiting. How are you accommodating people that may be of neurodiversity? How does ageism affect the workplace? So it's a gamut of questions to get the conversation going.
That's amazing. I think, yeah, so many people need that. And I just posted something the other day that about asking really insightful questions. And so it really starts there. If we want to dig deeper, we have to be willing to ask the question and then listen to the answer. So
Yeah.
can't wait to check those out. Any, I guess, last parting advice that you would give to anybody who is looking to continue to build up their credibility and just overall smartness related to becoming a marketing leader? What would you say?
Yep. You have to stay learning. You have to keep learning. I mean, I remember when I graduated from college, I was like, I'm never going to read another book again. And I probably do more reading now than ever before. And it's a hybrid of business articles and business books, and I say business broadly, marketing, entrepreneurship, messaging, all of these things. And next thing you know, you grow up and now your friends are authors too. So you just have to keep learning and apply it and share the knowledge from creating your own content, speaking, doing podcast interviews. I think that's the best way to really understand if you're assimilating information is by sharing it with others.
Yes, amazing. Great advice. Well, Michelle, tell everybody how they can get in touch with you.
Yes, so please connect with me on LinkedIn, and my website is Michelle Ngome, Michelle, MICHELLENGOME.com, and just reach out to me, and I'm glad to connect with anyone.
Awesome. Thank you so much for your time and sharing your amazing experience and wisdom here today.
Yeah.
Thank you for listening to this episode of The Confident Marketing Leader. I hope that you gained new insights to help you keep your seat at the leadership table. You can reach me anytime through LinkedIn and at shakemktg.com. Links are in my bio. And if you find this content interesting, or if you know another marketing leader who needs to know about it, please share it so we can help build up our credibility and make a bigger impact as a B2B marketing community. Looking forward to being with you again next time.